Saudi Arabia is on high alert along with several of its oil-rich neighbors and U.S. forces in the Gulf region. It's after Saudi officials shared intelligence with the U.S. about a possible attack from Iran. Riyadh said Tehran is planning an attack on the kingdom's energy infrastructure to divert attention away from mass protests that have engulfed Iran for several weeks. A spokesperson of the U.S. National Security Council said Washington would not hesitate to act to protect its interests in the region. Iran has denied it poses a threat to Saudi Arabia and called Riyadh's warnings baseless. Iranian officials have publicly accused Saudi Arabia and other countries of instigating the protests sparked by the death of Masha Amini in police custody. Back in 2019, both the U.S. and Saudi Arabia accused Iran of a series of attacks that slashed the kingdom's oil output by half. So is the Gulf headed for a repeat of 2019, or is there something more behind the Saudi warning about Iran? And for more on the Saudi warning, I'm joined by Afshin Shaji from London. He's a senior lecturer in Middle East politics and international relations at Bradford University. And Asif Shuja, he's a senior research fellow at Singapore's Middle East Institute. Gentlemen, welcome to Strict Talk. It's good to have you on the program. So, Afshin, Saudi officials have reportedly told the U.S. that Iran might attack the kingdom. How credible was this?
The thing is, we don't know for sure if this is going to be an imminent threat or not. Based on the Saudi intelligence, which was also leaked to the U.S. media, in recent days, some kind of suspicious concentration of Iranian forces has been seen basically in the certain areas, which has alarmed the Saudi establishment. But in addition to kind of the suspicious activities of the Iranian military and certainly IRGC, in recent days, some outlets closer to kind of the hardliners of the Islamic Republic have used kind of various methods and various language to directly or indirectly threaten Saudi Arabia. And the reason that they have been kind of trying to put more pressure on Saudi Arabia, because one of the most influential Iranian the TV stations based in London are probably funded by Saudi Arabia. And in recent weeks, in light of kind of the protests in Iran, Iran International has been playing a very, very important role to spread the news and circulate the information. And that certainly has angered the Islamic Republic, and they have threatened to retaliate.
So, but Asif, why would Iran attack Saudi Arabia? What's the reasoning behind this?
Well, at the outset, I would say that we will have to look at this news with a lot of pinch of salt, you know, because when this news has come up from Wall Street Journal about the conflict or potential conflict between Saudi Arabia and Iran, the news here is not Iran or Saudi Arabia. The news here is Wall Street Journal, and the source of it, that is the United Nations. And you will have to get into the broader spectrum of the things, that is the deteriorating relationship between United States and Saudi Arabia. See, we will have to remember that Saudi Arabia and Iran do not have a diplomatic relationship since January 2016. So these kind of issues will always be there between two countries who are not on friendly terms. But blowing these kind of issues at a particular time, then you will have to look at the context of this kind of news. And as far as this news is concerned, there are no sources that have been cited, number one. Number two, Iran has outrightly rejected that we are not intending to do anything. Number three, Saudi Arabian officials have not commented anything on that.
Yes.
So we'll have to look at this story from that angle.
But Afshin, the U.S. and Persian Gulf officials has just recently announced that the threat of an attack from Iran had eased. So how has this happened, and did its exposure have Iran back down?
I mean, just let me kind of add 1 or 2 points to what just Asif said. I mean, as I said at the beginning, I mean, we're not for sure if there has been kind of a serious threat against Saudi Arabia from the Islamic Republic or not. But the reason that I suppose a lot of people were alarmed when the news came out by the Wall Street Journal was because of the fact that Iran in recent years, particularly in 2019, has used its proxy forces in order to directly target Saudi Arabia. I suppose we can then mention the attack on Aramco facilities in 2019, which for a few days had an impact on oil circulation from Saudi Arabia, because there is a context of confrontation, because there is a history of attack in recent years where the Islamic Republic have used its proxy forces, primarily Houthis. This news obviously managed to generate a lot of interest and for sure alarm the security establishment in the region. But obviously, Iran is facing with some fundamental challenges at the moment, and some people would argue that maybe Iran wants to use kind of diversionary foreign policy in order to divert the attention from what is happening inside Iran, from the crippling economy, from basically the protests which has been going on for about 40 days. But at the same time, there were a lot of people who were probably even sympathetic to the regime, who argued that a decision like this, attacking Saudi Arabia at this sensitive time, would be extremely dangerous for the Islamic Republic and probably would face repercussions from the United States.
So, Asif, not only Saudi Arabia, but also Iraq is on high alert against a possible Iranian attack. How has Iraq become a threat to Iran?
No, actually, Iraq is not a threat as a country, but there are Kurdish regions, there are regions where some people are there who have been instigating or fueling the protest that is there in Iran. So Iran has attacked those regions, and actually it has notified United Nations that we have done those kind of strikes within the territory of Iraq. That is put on record. Okay, it has not denied it. So that is something that is at one side, and this is another pretext on which this whole story has been weaved, about the Wall Street Journal, because Iran has already done it, so it may do it again in Saudi Arabia. So people will think that, okay, there is some kind of credence in this story. But so far as this story is concerned, I don't think, and the funniest part of this is that the Saudis would tell the United States about the intelligence, because the current atmosphere is not such where Saudi Arabia would be depending on United States to have some kind of backup, especially after what happened in Afghanistan, where United States simply denied any kind of intervention in this kind of scenario. So I see that this whole story is not highly credible.
Yes. So, Afshin, is Saudi Arabia still a reliable partner for the United States after it has cut oil production by 2 million barrels per day right before the midterm elections in the U.S.?
I mean, anybody who looks at what has been happening between Saudi Arabia and United States would tell you that probably this is a very, very difficult diplomatic time. Between these two the countries. Generally, from the very beginning of the Biden administrations, Saudi-U.S. relations has been going through, a lot of the difficulties. Of course, everybody recognizes that, the Mohammed bin Salman and Biden are in extremely bad terms. But I think the U.S. administration is not only kind of looking at the quality of relationship between bin Salman and Biden at this specific kind of a historic moment. They have kind of a long view, and of course they look at the situation that kind of Iran, if kind of begins to create more instability in the region, not only is going to have kind of problems and issues for Saudi Arabia, but for the wider region, and obviously it can have serious consequences for American allies and partners in the region. Despite the fact that there are a lot of difficulties between Saudi Arabia and the United States, I assume that if Iran decides to use its proxy force to put more pressure on Saudi Arabia, the United States, despite all the problems, has no choice but to react to the Islamic Republic, because otherwise this would create a very the kind of problematic precedent at the time that the flow of energy in the region never ever has been as vital as today. The US is afraid of further instability and further escalation, and certainly would kind of act firmly in order to deter Iran.
So, Asif, what's your thoughts on that? I mean, would you agree with Afshin? And maybe we should also add that US President Biden, during a campaign rally, said they're going to free Iran, or Iran will free itself. So what's your take on that?
Look, let's get back to time in 2000 January, when Qasem Soleimani, the IRGC chief, was assassinated by the United States. At that time, the message that we have is that he was there to mediate between Iraq and Saudi Arabia. Iran and Saudi Arabia, mediated by Iraq, right? So we see that, you know, there are some forces who do not like these two countries to befriend, right? Now the scenario is such that Russia has been involved with Ukraine, which is being supported by the United States, and this kind of a scenario has created a kind of oil crisis, in which Saudi Arabia could play a very important role. But the OPEC Plus decision that we have seen is that Saudi Arabia can play some role, but not at the cost of shattering its own economy. So that is why Saudi Arabia has taken a very reasonable decision, and with the consensus of all the rest of the partners of OPEC Plus, to cut oil production by 2 million barrels, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that has been a very contentious point from the United States point of view.
Yeah. Okay. All right, gentlemen. Unfortunately, we'll have to leave it here. Thank you very much for joining me on Straight Talk.